keep going when you feel like shit. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think it's quite apt, doesn't it? Just come off the
Yeah,
top of my head, that one.
yeah. So
Well,
we're
I've
live.
got a
We're live.
cold as well. I've got a
We're
cold as
live
well.
now anyway. So
Still crack on, don't you?
yeah. So we're live now.
Good.
So we're going to talk about resilience.
Resilience on Easter Monday.
Why are we talking about resilience, John?
Because you just told me you're not feeling too good.
Right.
I'm coughing. I've been coughing and spluttering for the last 2 or 3 days. So, and as you can tell from my voice, I'm not exactly in the best of health. And I think I'm sure you've been up to things, and I was trying to climb Penway Fan at the weekend. So I think it just shows you that even when you're not, even not when you're at the peak of your fitness, which I sound I'm not anyway. You've got to crack on, haven't you? At the end of the day, I think it's important. You still got to put one foot in front of the better and try and
I suppose.
as much as possible.
Yeah, I suppose it's how you frame it in your mind. I suppose, and trying to keep on going. So we both don't feel great. I feel shit, so everyone really knows what's going on. I could literally lie down and probably hug the toilet for a little while because I feel that rough. I'd probably be puking. But as I've committed to this every Monday, I thought I've got to, even if I'll just turn up, even if I'm just a ghost and John carries me. But either way, it's got to be done. But I think that leads really into what you're saying about resilience, and it's having that. I don't know if courage is the word. Courage of your convictions, I suppose, to say, look, this is what I do, and this is what I'll continue doing. And I've run that into a lot of things I do. I just do them even if I don't feel like doing them, and sometimes that can be really difficult. How do you deal with it, John?
I think like you say, it's just not. You got to go as far as you can go, haven't you? I think it's not accepting any no's, isn't it? I mean, it depends if it depends who's leading, isn't it? I mean, we're going to walking up in Wales, and we've got everything wrong, really. We went on the wrong day insofar as we just realised that the clocks were going forward. Today we'd have to leave the Cotswolds at sort of like 6:30 in the morning. So that was like, so that was like an hour taken out of the day.
Right.
2.5 journey to Wales. And then you just get down there, and obviously the wind was gusting, but in the end you still crack on, don't you? You think it's going to be tough work, but until you go until you think it's a bit dangerous here. We don't really want to be bringing mountain rescue people out from getting blown over and breaking a leg. So it was good to turn back, but yeah, I think you've got to try things, haven't you, to the point where you think I'm not comfortable doing this now. This is like getting on the border of like it's a bit dangerous. We have rucksacks and we've done obviously a lot of walking in our time, but a helicopter certainly couldn't get up to where we were. So you're just putting other people's lives at risk. So we turned back, but there was people as we were coming down. There was people passing us by in shorts, trainers, frightening. And you're saying to these people, oh, but again, some people have got to see it for themselves. But I think I think you learn. I think you learn from. I mean, I was a bloke that I climbed Killy with, and he was an army guy, and he said, like, your mind will go massively further than you think it will go. I think I must have think something in the army. Like when you all think your tank's half empty and you can't go anything. You can't go any further. He said, you'll go another, 5 miles, 10 miles, whatever. He said it's really, really interesting that your body can go a lot further than your mind. So, and I think I think it's often, isn't it? I mean, you're very good at remapping. You know, like they say, when you get a car in it, you know, if you want to make a car go faster, you plug in some electronics, you remap the engine, don't you? I think it's, you know, it's no different to a human brain, is it really? All you're doing is you're convincing it can go further and do a lot better than it can.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the things that we go through is all about coding in your mind. So it's how you represent it. It's how the code's written, and then if your code is, you know, well, you fall at the first hurdle. That's the code effectively. That's your. So in order, it's funny because I just did a life lesson about working harder on yourself than you do on your job, and that's a principle that I was presented to me years ago by the author Jim Rohn, and I got that principle quite early. I was lucky, and it's you know, so it's always, I'm always working and pushing because I want to make sure that code in my head is giving me the optimum opportunity to succeed in what I do. And so I think resilience comes from that mindset that you are going to be successful at what you're going to be doing, or you've committed to it, so therefore you'll continue doing it. And another life lesson was about failure as well. And I think the only time you can fail is when you're dead, if you think about it, because that's when you give up. You can't do anything else then, because up until then, and you know, it doesn't matter. Even if you didn't do it when you was younger, you can still do something. And yeah, that time's never against you. People think it is, but it's not. So I think it really comes down to resilience is more of a state of mind than anything else. It's, you know, it's having that fortitude. I think I don't know if you ever know. I've probably never spoke to you about it before, but it's 4 virtues that I love. And I nicked them from Gladiator. You know the film Gladiator with Russell.
Oh yeah.
And before you know, Marcus Aurelius' son actually killed him, put the pillar over his head, he said, you've got 4 virtues, and he said, and I've got none of them virtues, but I've got other virtues. But the virtues were justice, fortitude, and temperance, and I can't remember the last one now. But if you think about courage, fortitude is courage, isn't it? If you think about it, it's having a sort of code of conduct to live to, and if you've got that, then resilience can come a lot easier to you if you've got a sort of really strong code to work from. I don't know how you see it, but that's the way I see it. Is that you can, there's an old saying, you can never fail if you never give up. Well, actually, you can never fail until you're dead. So you just keep on going, keep on having the courage to keep on going, and have the belief that you'll be fine. You know, you'll be okay. It will turn out for the best, and nothing lasts forever. So it's just keep on going. So, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, it's definitely belief and also conviction, isn't it? And I mean, you see it. I mean, obviously, the brain's a very clever instrument. I remember going to some mindset thing, some business person was running ages ago. We're talking decades ago, and he sort of said to someone, he said, "Oh, who's got a watch in the audience? Who's got a watch with a sleeping hand on it? You know, he said, can I borrow it from you?" So he sort of like, so he got this watch off this person. He said, I want you to take your big inhaler breath. And he said, you know, obviously just do it. he said, no, you know, I want you to hold your breath for as long as you possibly can. Don't obviously, you know, we don't want to be calling an ambulance here, but you know, and then I want you to exhale it. And so he said, ready, you know, let me know when you're ready to go, and we'll go. So we go, and then he said something like, I don't know, he said, you just done 1 minute. He said, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to give you this watch back now. And he said, I want you to, we're going to carry on. He said, I want you to have 3 goes. I want you to beat your best. So just put your hand up when you've beaten your best. I think it was the second go. This person put his hand up. So I've just done like 1 25. And then he said, oh, just a little secret. You never done 1 minute 15 seconds. You actually done 45 seconds. I've just sort of tricked you into where you framed that at. And that was like whoa, because the person had been told, and the brain had been convinced. That was almost like, that's, I've done that. I could, get past that. I can beat that best. So, it's just a little very, very interesting exercise that someone had done, and I thought very powerful, the brain. But yeah,
there's another one they do on them events is when you stand there and you spin round as far as you can.
Yeah.
And then you imagine doing it, going even further. And when you do it the second time, you go a lot further than you did the first time round, because sometimes you've got to imagine it in your mind, because he's obviously imagined that he's already done a minute, even though he done a 45 seconds. So now his brain knows he can thinks he can go further than he actually did before. So it's quite an interesting. Yeah, I think and what you were saying earlier about the military guys, knowing you can go further even though you feel you can't, because 80% of success is usually mental, and 20% is the rest of it. So they say. I mean, I don't know that for a fact. I've never done the research myself, but that's what we're led to believe. I think it's true. I always equate it to this way, right? And if I'm doing a talk and the audience is not convinced, or I'm not convinced the audience are 100% on board, I ask people, what do you think with? If you think about in your body, what do you use to think with? And you use your mind, right, to think with. All right. So if I ask the audience who thinks they're going to be successful, and the majority of people put their hand up, and then I'll ask the next question is, who knows they'll be successful? And a lot less people put their hands up then. And I asked that question for one reason, and one reason only, is that when you know something, when you think something, you think here. When you know something, it's in a different part of your body. It's usually in here. It's usually somewhere in your body rather than your mind. And if you can just flick that from thinking to knowing, because when I left the baking trade to go into estate agents, I didn't think I'd be successful in it. I knew I would be. I knew I'd do all right. I knew I'd do well. So it's I suppose in a way that's tricking your mind, because my mantra was, I watched someone doing something and I think I can do that. Even if I cocked up, I knew I could do it. So I suppose it's understanding how you present it. Again, it's all coding, really. So it's understanding how you code it in your mind,
100%. You can see that evidence on things like, I'm catching up with some of the old Dragon Den things a while ago, and we had a client of ours on it recently. But you've only got to look back over past episodes and series, and when they event, the product, obviously, the product's got to have something unique, and they can see an angle on it. But I would say a massive proportion of their decision making is they're investing in the person. And that is that person's belief is they're come hell or high water, they're gonna get that product and push it and push it and push it and push it, and and it's also the backstory, isn't it? It's a backstory those dragons are in, but they're interested in where's that person come from, what's he gone through, because invariably there are a lot of like backstories to these people that falling down 5 times, get up 6, that sort of thing. So I think, definitely. I mean, I think if
what's your backstory, John? I've never asked you.
What's my backstory? Gosh, my backstory. Quite a lot, really. I suppose. I mean, again, there you go. Okay, I'll give you one of it. I left. I was in BT as a technical engineer. Right. I was frustrated that I could get there sometimes an hour early for work, get on the steps. We were diagnosing faults on private wires. So we sat in a computer and we controlled the whole fault reporting and fixing it. It was a great job. We sat in the computer, we diagnosed it, controlled teams of people. You could be there an hour early. Start time was 8:30. other people in the team could arrive in the lift with the boss at 9 o'clock. It was, typical, nationalised industry that had gone private, that was still, in the past. So you had a team of 20 people and people on their feet up on the desk. Everyone get paid the same whether you worked hard or not. I'd have a conversation with my boss. He said, well, you can come in late if you want, but if it's not in your genes, you try coming in late when it's not in your genes. It's really hard. So anyway, they were doing this release scheme, and I thought I'd just sort of like, I don't know, I said I'm off, and it was like, you're gonna quit, and I went, yeah, just go. It's a perfect opportunity. What are you gonna do? I don't know. I'm just, I'm gonna have a go at something else.
Wow.
There was a bit of protection. But the moment I said that, the old hand was going like this, because I should effectively quit. But how many people have set up businesses when they've been made redundant successfully? And they've not done that deliberately. They've done it because they've been forced into a corner. So,
I was forced in the corner. But I'll go back to that in a second. But that was a well-paid job at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember going to telling my late father, and him sort of like, it's because it's quite my father. I've got two brothers. He wanted them to be photographers, and then obviously they didn't. One was a mechanic, one was a butcher, and then I come along wanting to be a photographer, and he's like, no, it's the worst job going now. You can't make any money in it. And then I get into like sort of, we were a technical officer in BT, and basically
technical officer in BT. So that's a big deal, wasn't it? I think you need to frame that a little bit more than what you are, because it just sounds like you framed it in a way where it was an okay. That was a fucking big deal.
Well, it was quite funny actually, because again, it's a story within a story. But we were at school, and it was like, can you go to RE, or there's a bloke from GPO doing a careers talk. So we thought, we'll skive out of that and go and see this bloke from GPO. And had a look at that, and that sounded quite interesting. Put an application in, This bloke chain smoking, head of post office telephones in Oxford. And he had us all in there, like, fine. And he said, right, we're recruiting you to be the next engineers that are going to run the next electronic exchanges for Great Britain. So we're recruiting you specifically for a role. We're going to put you through 3 years of education. And he said, in 3 years' time, we're going to give you these digital exchanges, because it was all clockwork in those days. Anyway, we went through all this training. Anyway, he said, we're not recruiting you to put you in a van and you're climbing poles. Anyway, 3 years later, we got a van and we were climbing poles. It's quite funny. But no, but then you move into that technical officer role, and it was interesting. But
to leave that role was a biggie. That was a well-paid role. That was probably not necessarily today, but certainly at the time it was probably a job for life. Probably a good pension at the end of it and all that business. So to chuck that up in the air was pretty remarkable. To not even know what you was going to do. I'm assuming you didn't. Did you have a mortgage, or was you living at home, or what?
Yeah. I mean, my dad was like, "God, what a mistake." He was like, "You want to go into financial services or something like that?" I said, "Well, that's the idea." And he's like, "Oh, you're just giving up a job for life, stupid." So, and it was considered a. I mean, I have got friends that have retired there, so it just shows you. Even with all the.
But my backstory is really simple. I was an estate agent for 10 years. I went through the recession of the 90s. I was a good estate agent. I was being considered for area manager at the time. Went through an acrimonious divorce. Wanted to spend more time with my kids. So I said to the area manager at the time, do you mind if I step down from manager for the time being, just for 6 months? He said, I'll make it easy for you. He said, you can go permanently. And I went, what? So technically, I had the sack. I was sacked, and I thought, and I remember going for an interview afterwards with another firm, and she knew who I was, and she said, "Paul, you're a really good agent." She said, "I don't know why you're sitting here talking to me, because I don't think you really want to be here." And I looked at her name was Jackie Wyatt, and I said, "No, you're right, Jackie. I don't want to be here." And she said, so don't waste my time. So I said, all right, no problem. Got up and walked out. And I never applied for another job after that. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a clue. In fact, I did a little bit of work for Bupa at the time. As a friend of mine, he was selling Bupa insurance, and he said, come and do it with us. And during that time, I remember I started buying a few deals for a couple of developers and nicking a few fees on it. And I had about $3,000 in cash on me. And the area manager, or the account manager at the time, or whatever it was, I can't remember his title now, took me out for a drink one evening, and I wasn't doing particularly well. I was barely making a living doing the Bupa, but because I was supplementing my main income from buying deals for developers. And he said, look, you're really good at what you do, but you're not putting the effort in. Like, what's wrong? So I said, do you want a drink? And I pulled out a wad of £50 notes. And he went, no wonder you don't want to work hard. I said, well, you just really done me a favour, because I realised I don't really want to do this for an evening, the weekends. And, it suited me for the time, for the interim period, but I don't want to do this. And that was it. And I didn't I was self-employed. And took a mortgage on a house to take my kids there, but through it, I wasn't. I knew one day I would probably have my own business, but I wasn't ready for it at that moment in time, if that makes sense. So sometimes you have to. And I've said to mates of mine in the past, you need the sack. You need to be booted out, because you're never going to leave until you've been booted out. Sometimes people need that push, that little kick. And the one thing I knew, I remember speaking to all my creditors, which was gas, electric, council tax, mortgage, just said to them, I'm gone self-employed. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay you for a couple of months. Will that be all right? Put a plan in place, never missed a payment. I've always paid them, because I was just making sure that I had 3 months just in case. I had 3 months money anyway to live for 3 months. And that was it. And that was my choice of going self-employed. And wasn't long after that I got an offer to team up with a developer on 50-50 basis. But again, it comes down to that resilience of, I was in a position where I just bought a house in the middle 90s. It was hard. Interest rates were ridiculous. I think I had a sort of low start mortgage on it, where they reduced the rate for a couple of years. And I remember buying the house without a bean. I got a developer to buy it, a deal I found, and said, look, I'll buy it off you. And I got a cash back on it. And they allowed cash backs in them days. You can't get a cash back on a mortgage today. Didn't cost me a bean. In fact, I got money back to buy some furniture. But I didn't worry about paying the mortgage. I never worried about paying all the other, because I knew deep down I would be fine. And there's just a knowing that everything's going to be all right. And I think if people can adapt that into their psyche, that everything's going to be all right, then they'll take more risks.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I do think it depends what age you are. I think there's a tendency people to put too much attachment to the word fail, isn't it? It's almost like it has too much of a negative connotation, because I mean,
I knew it was different probably for you, because going back to BT would have probably been harder than getting into it in the first place, because after years, you might have done because you've experienced, but getting back into BT after leaving would be more difficult for you. Whereas I always knew that I'd get a job as a estate agent, full stop, because anyone would employ me, only because it was a sales orientated job. And if you're half decent at sales, you don't have to be brilliant, but if you're half decent in sales, you'll get a job, won't you? So I always knew that I'd have a career to fall back on if I needed to go. Yours was riskier, really, if you think about it, because you was walking away from that job for life.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I just didn't see it as risky at the time. I just felt it was like. I mean, I think obviously there was a release. There was a redundancy package, which I thought was obviously de-risking it. But yeah, I mean, you've definitely given up the. I'd like they used to say in banking in those days, weren't they? People like jobs for life. You know, people wouldn't leave banks. Yeah, it's interesting you look back, but it's certainly yeah.
So, what tip would you give someone in a position who'd love to take a gamble, or they would love to take that first step? What advice would you give them, having been in that position in the past yourself?
Well, you've got. I mean, obviously, it depends where you how much you. I mean, I think time is the first thing, isn't it? Everyone says I haven't got enough time. If you want something bad enough, you'll make time. We all know that. So I think you've got to allocate as much time as you possibly can to do proof of concept. Isn't at the end, you know, it's proof of concept. So it's basically how much time can I allocate. So if it's like saying the property word, how many hours have I got to allocate to find a deal that I can, for example, do some work on it, put it back to the market and make some money. And then after that, it comes back to your data, doesn't it? And your numbers. Once you know what hours you've got to put in, how many people you got, you know, how many phone calls you've got to make, how many agents you've got to talk, how many property viewings you've got to come and how many, you know, offers you make, how many accepted, and then away you go. Then it's just you're working backwards, aren't you? Then it's you de-risked it. You've effectively right. Okay, that's taken me, you know, X amount of phone calls, you know, 15 to 20 visits, and so if I do that full time, I'm gonna get 4 times the result of getting it doing it as a sign gig. So I think you know you've got to go into it with some rationale. I mean, a lot of people say I want to go into property, I'm going to quit my job. Well, has a negative connotation, and sometimes you're not financeable as much. Obviously, short-term finance you can get. So I think you can basically stack the dice in your favour a little bit more. But I would, I mean, I think you've got to want it, and you've got to use every moment you've got spare. It becomes your hobby, isn't it? As in, like, you know, instead of going walking or watching Netflix or the things you would normally do for relaxing, you've got to think, right, there's 15 hours a week. I could just, you know, by just getting up. I mean, you know, if I want to get an extra bit done, just get in the office 2 hours early. You know, I mean, those 2 hours, they're probably worth 3 or 4 hours during the day because you don't get phone calls, you don't get bothered. So everyone's got time they can pull in from anywhere.
I think it's an element. I think you sort of touched on it. Whether someone wants to give up their job and change careers, whether that career, you know, be like you, financial services. Mine was a estate agency. I think you can get into an industry, but you might have to go through the back door. It always reminds me of young Jason, my stepson, when he was a lad. He wanted to be a BA pilot, and he spoke to his careers officer. And his careers officer put him right off and said, look, you know, you're not good at the aptitude for it. You know, you're not going to get the grades, blah, blah, blah. And our neighbour was a BA pilot, and he didn't have qualifications coming out of his ears. He was ex-military, admittedly, but he went through the backdoor route. So I said, look, if you want to be a careers teacher, speak to your careers teacher. But if you want to be a BA pilot, find a BA pilot and find out what he did. So you nipped down to see Scully. He had a chat with Scully, and Charlie told him the route that he went down. He said, "This is what I would do today." So he gave him a plan. His plan was failed not because of any other reason, but when Jason really got his eyesight tested, his eyesight was too bad to be a pilot, so he couldn't physically be a pilot. So that stopped him from doing it. But had he had the eyesight, guaranteed that boy would have been a BA pilot, because he had the foresight, he drilled Scully. So what do I do here? What do I do here? What do I do? And he had a plan. He had the simulator upstairs in his bedroom, right? The flight simulators. So I think it comes to, and he was so determined. When he found out he failed the eye test, and they said, look, your eyes are that bad, you can't even have I don't know if you know this, but you can't even be a pilot if you have laser surgery. If you haven't got 20/20 vision, you can't be a pilot, right? So he was never going to be a pilot as far as, you know, a commercial pilot's concerned. So what he done is he switched, and he went from that, and he decided he wanted to be a DJ. And by the age of 17, he'd bought all the equipment. He'd bought a van. He couldn't even drive. His mum used to drive him round where he had L plates on. She used to drive with him at 17 to the gigs, right? And he had a business, his own business at 17. So he was always entrepreneur. He's always pushing for the next thing. And he's done exceptionally well for himself over the last 14, 15 years. But it's either in you or it's not in you sometimes. You know, if you've got to find that spark, that entrepreneurial spirit, because that entrepreneurial spirit is in all of us if we look for it. Some of us just don't believe we can do it. Some of us believe or know we can do it. I always know whatever I'm going to throw myself into, I'll be fine. I'll make it work somehow, way, shape, or form.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's definitely and also, you know, you've got to be happy. You spend a third of your life at work, haven't you? So you know,
I don't see it as work. I've never seen it as work.
That's what I mean.
Never.
No, that's what I was going to say. So
only time I saw it as work was when I was a baker, and that was work.
Yeah. So if you're not happy, do something that do something that you can follow. But give it a go. Roll the dice. Definitely.
Right. Okay. Well, listen, it's gone 7:30, and I'm not feeling great, so I'm going to go and probably have a lie down now.
Everyone have a good week.
All the best, and we'll speak soon. All right. See you next week.
See you later.
See you later.